welcome to episode number 5 of Innovations in Business Technology. I'm your host, Troy McCauley, and we are recording today on Monday, October 16th, 2017. Our topic today is going to be disaster recovery. Obviously, that's something that's top of mind for a lot of people today. We're still in the process of dealing with the California wildfires here in the U.S. Houston is slowly recovering from the horrors of Hurricane Harvey. Florida is recovering from a almost machine gun salvo of hurricane after hurricane, and all of the country, of course, is dealing with the events that happened in Nevada. And while the Nevada incident isn't something that really affected businesses on a physical scale, everyone's affected by these disasters, and it's something that companies need to consider, right? So what is disaster recovery? I think disaster recovery as an industry really came into the forefront back in 2011. Obviously, with the September 11th attacks, 2001. Obviously, with the September 11th attacks back in 2001, how much damage was done to those companies in the two towers by lost data was far exceeded the amount of damage done to them by lost property. And people took notice of that, and the entire technology industry changed and refocused on how to protect companies and make sure that in the event that something unforeseen and horrible occurs, your company has a plan on how to deal with it. So what do you do? Now, any company at $100 million plus, that's going to be part of their requirements. Any publicly owned company is going to be absolutely required to have a disaster recovery plan as part of their IPO. But let's say you're a smaller company, you don't have an IPO, you're not publicly traded, you've got 50, 100 employees, right? You don't have $1 million a year IT budget. So what do you do if something horrible happens? And from personal experience, I can tell you what most companies that size are doing right now, even today, is either crossing their fingers and praying that nothing happens to them, or at best using a tape backup system, backing up their data every day, every couple days, every week, and bringing that data home, or a slightly better case, taking that data to a storage facility every week. And there's obviously, if that's all you can do, if you have zero IT budget and you're a 5-person company, fine. You don't stand to lose that much. But if you've got 50, 100, $150 million in revenue, you've got customer data you have to protect. You've got vendor data you have to protect. You've got employee data you have to protect. And more importantly than all of that is the fact that you need to be able to get up and running and doing business again as quickly as possible, because most small companies simply don't have the cash reserves to survive a 7, 10, 30-day blackout of inability to function. And that's what's happening to companies right now in Houston and Florida, and God forbid, Puerto Rico. So what do you do if you're one of those companies? How do you protect yourself? And that's where a disaster recovery plan comes into effect. A disaster recovery plan has two key pieces to it. Those are a recovery time objective and a recovery place objective, or a recovery point. Okay? The recovery point is, where are we going to recover from? This is a location, a secondary location from your primary office that office is going to use as a recovery point. If you've got multiple offices, you need to either have multiple recovery points, or you need to have a single recovery point capable of handling all of your multiple offices. Now, if you're a national company and you've got offices all over the country, then you're probably, again, already over the level of company that I'd be talking to here. If you're a $100 million company, you've got $1 million IT budget and you're dealing with this at a very high level. Probably got an Iron Mountain contract or something along those lines. But if you're a $20 million company, a $1 million a year company, okay, then you're the people I'm talking to, and this is how you need to deal with these things. You still need to have a recovery point objective and a recovery time objective, no matter how small you are. Because the smaller you are, the more you have to lose by not being able to do business. And that's where the innovations in business technology comes in, because what's changed between now and September 11th, 2001 is that back then, cloud technology effectively didn't exist. You did not have the ability to run your entire business in a virtual server. Now you do. So the smaller you are, the more important it is to have a third-party vendor that is capable of making sure that every bit of your data is being backed up every single day and is being restored or is being stored, backed up in multiple offsite locations. A good example of this is our sponsor, Atlantic IT. They provide disaster recovery services for their clients in the mid-Atlantic seaboard area, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Washington, D.C., and New York. For companies in those areas, they can provide multiple secure offsite locations, disaster point objective, and they're providing redundant cloud backup that can be backed up within anywhere from 12 to 48 hours, depending on what the cost that's being paid by the individual client. That's your recovery time objective. Okay, so and if you're not in the Northeast, the mid-Atlantic seaboard, if you're up in Maine or you're down in Texas or you're in California, there are companies that can help you there too. There's lots of companies that know how to do this. And if you're a $20 million company with 50 employees, you need that, because you simply do not have the resources to provide all of these objectives yourself. You don't have the ability to build, buy, and maintain an off-site office that's just sitting there hoping you need it. But a company, a third-party company, can contract that to where all they know that all of their clients have access to that facility, and they're able to spread that out across enough of a wide area to know that, barring a nuclear war, in which case nobody's really worried about recovering their data, right? Barring that, or an asteroid strike or something that's going to wipe out the whole planet. If it's a regional disaster, which all disasters are regional, no disasters are nationwide, barring total wipeout of the civilization. And again, in that situation, we got bigger problems than if we're going to be able to recover our profits. So in any recoverable disaster, it's going to be regional, and it's going to be something that can be recovered within a relatively close region. So if it's Hurricane Harvey, perfect example, right? Hurricane Harvey wiped out the entire city of Houston for all practical purposes. Any business that was operating on the first or second floor of a business in the floodplain, they're done. All of their data is gone. It's underwater for days. I don't care if they had tape backup. I don't care if they have disk backup. I don't care if they have redundant internal backup. Anything that was stored on their servers is gone. But if they had a redundant cloud backup service, that data was already within hours, much less days, being restored to a location, probably say 50 miles from Houston, on high ground, already ready to go. And those companies got a call from their vendor saying, hey, Mr. CTO, Mr. CFO, Mr. President, you don't have to worry. Your people can report to their recovery point, and your recovery time objective is being met. You will have full capability for X number of employees with all of the software and applications that they're used to use, and all of their data completely recovered and restored, ready to roll. They just need to show up for work at a different place, assuming that they're able to, obviously, based on the situation. So that's where we have today the capability that we're able to do that. If you're a small business, you need to make sure you have a recovery point and that you have a recovery time objective that's reasonable and can be maintained by whoever's handling it. And if you don't have a massive team or a massive budget, you need to have a vendor that can spread that risk around. It's the same reason that we have insurance. The reason that you buy insurance is because you cannot afford to personally pay for every possible amount of damage that occurs. You have auto insurance because you can't afford to pay $1 million if you accidentally run a red light, hit someone, and they're paralyzed for life and they have $1 million in medical claims. Right? Some people can afford to pay that. Most people can't. That's why you have insurance. You have insurance as a business because you can't afford to deal with the cost of one of your employees slipping on a banana peel, falling down the stairs, crippled for life, and it's $1 million claim. You don't have $1 million to pay for their health care and disability for the rest of their lives. That's why you have insurance. And insurance survives by insuring millions of companies across the country and across the world so that everyone is paying into that pool, so that when that one employee does fall down the stairs, falls on a banana peel, and is crippled for life, hundreds of thousands of companies have been paying into the benefit pool so that the money is there to cover them, and that the company that happened to can still continue to function. That's the same idea when it comes to disaster recovery. But in disaster recovery, it's not a question of getting money back or protecting yourself from specific moneyed losses. It's about making sure that your business can continue to operate. So we're going to go ahead and take a break, have a message from our sponsor, Atlantic IT, and then we'll have a video or two of exactly how disaster recovery services have worked out for other companies across the country in past situations very similar to this. I hope this has been beneficial. I hope that you take advantage of this knowledge, because if you are a company, if you're a new business, you're a startup, you're getting up and running, you just hired your 20th employee and you think everything's great, you need to make sure that you have your disaster recovery plan in place, because it is absolutely unrecoverable if you don't have something like that. And you're that company in Houston that just hired their 20th employee and now they can't do business for a month. By the time they're finally up and running, it's too late. So think about it. Make sure your plans are in place. If you have a disaster recovery plan, double check it. Make sure everything's running. Call your vendor. Make sure they have those capabilities. Test them. Make sure it works. Don't take anybody's word for it. Only trust yourself. And then, once you've got it verified, you're good to go. So, thank you so much. I hope that this episode has been valuable for everyone. And we'll go ahead and have a word from our sponsor, Atlantic IT. So, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Atlantic IT. Atlantic IT is located in Somerset, New Jersey, and provides service to companies from the New York metropolitan area all the way to Washington, D.C., providing IT outsourcing services from the simplest thing of basic network monitoring all the way to providing a completely full service IT department 24/7 for companies of any size. So, if you have any IT needs, from the simplest to the most complex, Atlantic IT has over 30 years of experience providing managed services to companies in the Mid-Atlantic region, and you can count on them to provide the services you need. We here at Innovations in Business Technology are very grateful to Atlantic IT for providing us with sponsoring, and we hope that you will reach out to them if you have any needs in that area.
Modern business can't afford downtime. Traditionally, protecting all of your most critical applications, including Tier 2 and 3 workloads, required building and maintaining a secondary data center, which was a costly undertaking. Even ongoing expenses associated with operating an existing data center were a massive monetary commitment and included hardware refreshes, IT maintenance personnel, utilities, and more. Now, there's a cost-effective alternative. Site Recovery from Azure, Microsoft's powerful cloud platform, lets you rest easy, knowing all your workloads are protected from any disaster, without having to build and maintain a secondary data center. Azure delivers cloud services that extend your data center and protect your IT infrastructure, transforming your business with a true hybrid solution. And with Site Recovery, you can eliminate the burden of maintaining expensive disaster recovery sites for critical workloads. Automate replication to Azure or a secondary data center. Safeguard complex workloads, including SQL and SharePoint, against outages. Support heterogeneous environments, including VMware, Hyper-V, and physical servers. Enhance recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives. Leverage the compute resources of Azure for dev testing and reduce infrastructure maintenance costs by permanently migrating workloads to Azure for a true hybrid experience, all at an affordable price. To learn how Azure Site Recovery can extend your data center and keep your business running, visit azure.com.
In this topic, we're going to talk about Azure Site Recovery. So Site Recovery is an interesting kind of service that we're providing in Azure, and really what the focus is about Site Recovery is to be able to provide you a way to orchestrate your disaster recovery failover. So a lot of people hear about this and they have kind of maybe sometimes misconstrued ideas about what actually happens here. So I'll kind of draw out a little bit about the overall architecture of how this actually works, and then we'll talk through some of the details. So if we were to look at a typical network here, if we have our on-prem network, and then we have Azure here, which is going to function as our DR, we could have, over here, we could have like Site 1, which is maybe our production site, and then we could have Site 2, which would be a secondary, maybe a backup data center that we have. And so we have a lot of servers over here doing our workloads on-prem. And we have, potentially these could be virtualized or physical servers. So we'll talk through each one of those, but just consider those to be server workloads. And up in Azure, we actually can provision what's called Site Recovery. So we'll provision a space in Site Recovery for our sites here. And when we set this up and configure it, we basically configure the orchestration of this failover. So we still have to have servers over here that we're going to fail over to in our Site 2. But in this model, basically, these guys are being replicated up through Site Recovery to potentially be failed over here. So we're going to see this guy is actually the guy who's controlling what's happening here, but the replication is actually potentially happening between these two sites right now. And Site Recovery is really about orchestrating that failover. So in the event that this Site 1 goes offline, something happens, power grid, some natural disaster happens in that area where those actual servers are, Azure Site Recovery can be used because it's running off premises, it's already in the cloud, and it can orchestrate that failover to make these servers now become the primaries. So that's from a real high level, 10,000 foot view, this is what we're trying to orchestrate, and that's what Site Recovery is really about. Now, the details about this are, I mentioned before, these could be physical servers, right? So we could have these be actual physical. These could be Hyper-V. So if we had Hyper-V hosts here, and actually these can actually be VMware. Now, VMware has some limited constraints right now. There's more being added to that daily, but the primary use case of when we bought, so we had a partner that actually had built a product called Image, and we ended up buying that product, and that's what we're integrating into Site Recovery over here. And so as those features get more mature and fleshed out, the features for doing things like VMware as opposed to a pure Windows, Hyper-V or physical server actually increase. So we'll be able to provide all those services right now. Right now we can do VMware between sites, but we can also do things like, what if we had an Azure tenant up here? And what if we wanted to actually replicate our servers up there to Azure and that become our DR? So right now we can do that from physical and Hyper-V. We can't do that from VMware yet. But that's something that's in the roadmap, and that's something that the product group's closely looking at, and I'm sure you're going to see that in the near future. But from a high level, this is what Site Recovery is about. I hope you enjoyed the topic on Azure Site Recovery.